think the big challenge for Shrewsbury Town is to ensure that the relegation from League One last season, it can be the start of a new era rather than the start of a decline. Because what Shrewsbury Town have achieved in terms of 10 consecutive seasons in League One was actually a pretty good achievement, because while they're not exactly minnows at that level in the same way you might think of other clubs, they've always been one of the smaller clubs in the division, and they achieved a playoff final under Paul Hurst in 17-18, with a very high points tally that year as well, and they're in the race for automatic promotion. They also, sort of on a smaller scale, achieved a top half finish under Steve Cottrell in the 22-23 campaign, I think it was. So they have had some good seasons in that time, and there've been a lot of seasons where they haven't necessarily been competing right at the bottom. They've sometimes been able to give themselves a bit of breathing room. So I think some good work's been done. I think they've, in terms of infrastructure, for a club of their size, it hasn't been too bad for much of the last 10 years. But I think what's clear is that for the club to create that new era and to make this the start of a new era rather than the start of a decline, it definitely needs some change at the top. It definitely needs some fresh investment. It definitely needs some fresh ideas. And hopefully Michael Appleton can provide some of those fresh ideas. This is somebody of esteemed coaching pedigree. Whether he can translate his ideas to a team and a club that's just been relegated, and whether his staff will have some of the motivational qualities required to get them across, I think is an intriguing question mark that makes me really curious about Shrewsbury's season ahead. So will Roland Whiteley stay on as owner, or will they get some fresh investment? And can they bounce back from their disappointment last season and create a new era at the Meadow? That's what we're here to discuss on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out a lot. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by Jack Groom from ShrewsAnalysis. Jack, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Evening, Gab. Thanks for having me as always.
Yeah, my pleasure. Do you feel like change is a must at Shrewsbury Town this summer?
Oh, 1000%. Yeah, I think things need to change. If there's any realistic ambitions of things getting better, yeah, there's a lot that needs to change off the pitch, on the pitch. At the minute, we've not seen too much of that. I know it's still at relatively early days and teams aren't back for pre-season yet, but fans are starting to get a little bit twitchy now that that return is only a week or so away. So yeah, certainly lots that needs to be improved upon if we're to have even a half decent season next year, I think.
Yeah, I think there's been a feeling that Roland Whiteley has been quite conservative about sort of inviting new people in, either to provide fresh investment and take on a stake in the club, or to even sell outright. And I think you can look at that in a positive way in terms of protecting the club and not letting the wrong people in, which I think would be admirable. There's also a feeling though that is there a sense that he's sort of somehow grabbing onto control and would find it hard to let go of the club? And I suppose I'm wondering what's your reading on things, or conversely, is there not much interest in the club in the first place, but that wouldn't fit with the various rumours that have come across? I think there was meant to be one or two American investors that have had some interest. So I'd love to hear how you'd read things.
I think at the minute, I mean, I'm in no position of special knowledge or anything like that.
Of
But at the
course.
minute, there's nothing. There's nothing that's coming from the club in terms of actual confirmed interest. There's the kind of the usual taglines that are being trotted out. Actively seeking investment is something that's become a bit of a tagline that's been used against the club over the last couple of years. But it's very disheartening, really. There was the interest from the allegedly American. That's the thing, allegedly American party that was kind of that started last at the back end of the last calendar year and then obviously fell through earlier this year. But since that's gone, the club reiterated they were looking to sell and they still wanted to do so. But there's been no mention of any names or anything really. It's been very, very barren, unfortunately. think again the interest has been there over the past 5, 10 years or so. Different names have been linked and all obviously fallen through for a variety of reasons that only a select few people will know. But at the minute, there's absolutely nothing to suggest that Roland Wycherley won't be the man at the top still when the first game of the season comes around on the 3rd of August, I think. And it certainly doesn't look like things will be changing at any time soon.
Yeah, no change on the horizon in terms of ownership, and no change in terms of the director of football role. Mickey Moore has come under a lot of criticism at Shrewsbury Town. I'm a little bit surprised at how his tenure has gone so far, because I really liked his work at Cheltenham Town. I've spoken to people there who said him and Michael Duff at the time had a really close working relationship, and that was part of why Cheltenham was so successful, and he was regarded as a really important operational figure. But he's hasn't quite won people over since moving to Shropshire.
No, not at all. I think I don't really like the word hate, but I think one of the most disliked people within that area of Shropshire that it is certainly Mickey Moore. He done himself no favours in terms of um, the results on the pitch is the bottom line, really. He's been in place for 2 seasons now. At the start of his first season, he said, "Judge me after a full season," and that season was pretty terrible, and we got away with a bit of luck for staying up. And then the season afterwards was even worse, and we finished rock bottom. So, in terms of credibility in the bank for him, there's very, very little, if anything. I think the only thing he will probably cling to is the success the under-17s had, winning one of the national competitions at the back end of the season. He'll probably point to that as something that has been a good achievement on his watch. But aside from that, there's been very little that he can kind of point to and say that he's done better at the club. And yeah, how he's kind of still in that position almost remains to be seen, really. Some people, I did a bit of a series of articles over the summer on my new website, or the website I'm now writing for Vital Football, and looking at the reasons that have led to the relegation over the past few years. And within that, I mentioned Mickey Moore's position and the fact that some people would maybe say, well, he took over at a tough time with all the financial difficulties and that, and he had a bit of a tough hand. Some maybe more cynical people would suggest that he's only being kept in place by the chairman so that the chairman's got someone to use as a metaphorical human shield to deflect the criticism that comes at the club. And if Mickey Moore wasn't there, it would all be on Wycherley then, whereas at the minute it's probably 50-50 between the two. Again, the noises that come out of the club suggest he's going nowhere. I think if he was to have been dismissed, he would have been dismissed at the end of the season. So yeah, there's no reason again to suggest to me that Mickey Moore won't be the man in the director of football position come the start of the season and for the foreseeable future as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I would maybe wonder is I don't see it as necessarily being a bad thing that somebody like Michael Appleton, who is going to be very busy with coaching, I think Michael Appleton does his best on the work on the coaching ground. I don't see it as a bad thing that the club does have somebody who can be out watching games and studying players, and even if Mickey Moore does have to shoulder some responsibility for the mistakes that he made over the last couple of years.
Yeah, again, personally, I quite like the director of football position. Being honest with you, Gab, it's something that I think the chairman should be given credit for implementing it. I think it's a forward-thinking move to try and keep up with the times as clubs change. Albeit the person that was chosen obviously hasn't done a very good job at the minute. But yeah, I think personally the position itself I don't have an issue with. It's obviously just the performance and the output that's been given by the man that is in that seat, in Mickey Moore. So what the threshold is that would see him dismissed, I don't know. I would imagine if we have a poor start to next season in League Two, I think surely you can't survive that. But just to go on to your other point regarding Michael Appleton, I think his appointment is arguably only the second one out of the four that have been made during Mickey Moore's time at the club that actually fits the kind of the identity that the club wanted to implement upon Moore's appointment. They said they were going to go to a head coach, director of football model. They did that with Matt Taylor. Matt Taylor was ultimately dismissed because everyone that watched that team could see that they were only heading one way. Again, I wrote about all this in my articles that are on the website on Vital Football, but they then appoint Paul Hurst, who definitely isn't the head coach and is a manager. And Mickey Moore then seemingly takes more of a back seat. They then appoint Gareth Ainsworth, who is certainly not a head coach and more of a manager. Again, Mickey Moore's role is then seemingly diminished too. and they've then come back to Michael Appleton, which again, in isolation, all four of those appointments can perhaps make sense. But when they're following on in chronological order, for a team to go from being managed by Matt Taylor trying to play a bit of football to Paul Hurst maybe trying to play a bit less to Gareth Ainsworth playing even less to then go to Michael Appleton who's trying to pass it out from the back like Barcelona under Pep, that the disjointed thinking is never going to lead to success ultimately. I think now with Appleton in place, I think there are some reasons to be slightly positive. And you just hope that we can put the past behind us and build forward under Appleton and build a squad that is cohesive, that is recruited to play that style of football. I'm far from confident that that will happen. I don't think it will be a season that we're looking to challenge for promotion unless we get some massively significant signings coming in over the next few weeks. And all we can do at the minute is hope that that identity now has been solidified upon and has been, chosen. That everyone is now pulling in the same direction to give that a better chance of working, rather than one person pulling to the left, one person pulling to the right, and one person pulling back, like seemingly has happened for the past 18 months or so at the club.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before I look forward to talking about Michael Appleton, but just one more on the sort of structural side of the club. Liam Dooley as CEO, quite a young lad for that kind of position. What have you sort of made of him so far?
Yeah, I think he's been in position probably just under 2 years. I think it was October time, 2023, he came in. And yeah, again, I don't want to say he's not done a good job, but equally I don't think you can say he has done a good job, if that makes sense, because ultimately the club is judged mainly by what happens on the pitch. I know a chief executive's role does span beyond that, and you're looking at things like community engagement, communication, and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think there are some good things that Dooley has done in terms of those areas, albeit I do think there are still a lot areas that can be improved upon a lot as well. Communication is a big thing for fans. That's never been Roland Wycherley's strong point, and Dooley and Mickey Moore both committed to putting out an open letter to the fans every 12 weeks, or roughly there or thereabouts, and he's done that. I think I did actually watch an interview that Dooley did with, I think, the Sports Business podcast a few months ago, and
Yes.
he thought our communication was very, very good. I'm paraphrasing there, but that it was very, it was to a higher standard. And I'll be honest, I still think it does need work. I get that the club can't have updates or can't be giving updates out, every other day or anything like
Mm.
that. But I think when it's got to a point where it has at the club and there's such fundamental changes needed and the wheels hopefully, going somewhere in the background, the fans just want to know what's going on and just know what the crack is. Again, I appreciate that there is some discretion around what can and can't be said, but again, to answer your question, he's done an okay job, but I still think there's improvements that can be done there as well.
Absolutely. Talking about Appleton, then, I think let's go with the positives to start with. One of the best coaches I've seen in terms of developing individual players. So if Shrewsbury Town are a club that needs to nurture some saleable assets, I think he's a great appointment from that point of view. I think he is somebody who can, over a number of years, nurture and develop a clear style of football. And he has got results previously at Oxford United and Lincoln City. So there is evidence that this can be a good appointment. But at previous clubs, there's been a question mark over Michael Appleton from a point of view of building connections with the fans. And I suppose from your point of view with regards to transparency, I don't know if Michael Appleton's necessarily going to help that aspect, because he isn't somebody who puts much energy into building relationships with the fan base. He's very focused on working with the team and the players in front of him, which, if he gets results, I don't think people are going to take exception to. And I suppose at the end of the day, that is what he's going to be judged on. But there's also part of me wondering about whether he can galvanise the club off the back of a relegation in a difficult moment.
Yeah, I think on that it isn't just down to him. I think the fact that Dooley and Moore are there and they're the ones that openly communicate with the fans that bit more. There's probably more expectation on the higher ups to do that. Obviously, Appleton has still got a part to play. Don't get me wrong, but I think I can be totally honest with you, Gab. All the excuse my French here, but all the bullshit that Gareth Ainsworth fed the fans. There's almost a bit of not happiness, but they're willing to accept someone who's not full of such bluff and isn't going to spout hot air and all that kind of thing. So that's not something that's really been discussed. I think, given the state of the club, there's bigger fish to fry at the minute, in terms of that. And I think no one's pointing the finger at Appleton, in terms of being a reason for that disconnect. He's been in charge, what was it, 9 games, and obviously he's now got a chance to put his stamp on the team. But yeah, I don't see that being a massive issue. Certainly not in the next couple of months, at least, anyway. I think there's the expectation on those in the hierarchy to communicate and to make the fans aware of what's happening behind the scenes. And for Appleton, ultimately, the teams that we've watched over the past 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever you want to say, have been that bad. He will be judged solely on how good the team that is put out is, and that is his job. And I think, provided he does a half decent job at that, most fans will be willing to accept it. In terms of interviews and that, we're not after someone who's going to come, again, as we've seen with previous managerial appointments, come out and start, kissing people's backsides and stuff like that, when maybe that then doesn't turn out to be true down the line. I think as long as he's honest and as long as again, fans want to get insight, fans want to understand the reasons why things are happening, and to just get a bit of a glimpse of what's happening behind closed doors at the club that they love. And so if he can give interviews that are genuinely interesting, certainly in my opinion, I think that's fine. He's not going to be someone who's all singing, all dancing, and that kind of thing. Provided he speaks honestly, and provided that he does give a bit of insight in his interviews, are genuinely interesting to listen to. And personally, that would be fine by me. If it gets to a point where all the off-field stuff is sorted and the only thing we can moan about is the bit of disconnection, I think fans will take that, to be honest, given what's happened over the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully that is going to be the case. So let's have a look at the squad then, Jack. In terms of the goalkeeping department, I think I've picked up on a bit of reservation at the idea of Toby Savin starting next season as the number one. So I guess you're going to need a new goalkeeper, ideally somebody who can distribute quite well to in line with Michael Appleton's style of play.
Yeah, I guess so. Toby Savin's a bit of a strange one in that he came in last season, obviously under Paul Hurst. First few games did okay, saved a few penalties, I think, in the EFL first round against Notts County, I think it was, to get us through that shootout. And in terms of the issues that fans could see early on last season, Savin wasn't one of those. It was a central defensive pairing that was the big issue, and the defensive solidity that fans could see was glaring. I think off the top of my head, the first massive error that Savin made was away at Wrexham, when he was involved in a bit of a miscommunication with Toto Enciala at that point. Again, from then on, there was nothing too bad. And certainly around the time of Paul Hurst's sacking, I don't really remember there being too many calls for Savin's head, really, in terms of, again, thinking of the priorities of what needed changing. It wasn't really the goalkeeping position. Obviously, Ainsworth has then come in, and then it was a kind of, from how I remember it, at least two games, Cambridge away, when Savin had an absolute howler, and I think was at fault for at least two, if not three, maybe even all four of the goals that Cambridge scored that day. And then the week after, we also conceded 4 against Wickham. Again, off the top of my head, I don't think that Savin was actually at fault for any of those, but when you concede 8 goals in 2 games, and in one of those games you've had an absolute stinker, the pressure's on, and you're under the spotlight. He was then taken out of the firing line. And I think because his last 2 appearances on the pitch were those 2 games, that's the memories that fans are kind of sticking to, which I totally understand.
Sure.
He then obviously lost his place to Jamal Blackman for the second half of the season, went out on loan to Barnet and to Halifax, I think. And now most people are there going, yeah, he's not good enough, and crack on, which I do understand, because I'm not saying he's a world beater by any means, but also, say, if he was to be, say, second choice this season, I don't think that would also be the worst thing in the world. At the back end of last season, I put out a bit of not a recruitment document, but my opinions on what I would do with all the players, went onto my X accounts. And I remember putting on that, I think I categorised him in the kind of the transfer list area where, yes, if he was to move on, nobody could argue that wasn't, a sensible decision. But also, if he was to stay and be second choice and push for a position, again, I personally wouldn't be too unhappy with that. But again, to answer your question, I think we do need a more confident goalkeeper and someone who's maybe a bit more adept at Appleton's style of play, to be the first choice, certainly.
That makes a lot of sense. Right centre half. I've mapped this squad out, by the way, as a 3-4-1-2. I've absolutely no idea whether Appleton will go for that formation or how we'll look to recruit, but that's what I've gone with for now.
Okay.
In terms of right centre half in a 3, I think it's a role that Luca Hall could suit because he's quite a steady, intelligent, solid right centre half, if you like. Probably not the biggest, so you wouldn't want him in the middle dealing with crosses. But as an outside centre half, I'd imagine he might be quite solid at League Two level.
Yeah, just thinking about it there, I think looking at Appleton, I would imagine he's going to go with a back four. I think his time
Okay.
at Charlton, um, Oxford, Lincoln, I think he was more of, say, a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 variations
Mm.
thereof. And certainly when he came in, he looks to play a back four as well at times. So that's personally what I'm expecting. I might be wrong in that, to be honest.
Right.
But I think that's maybe where we could be heading. So on Luca Hall, again, he was someone who, when you're playing a team that's conceded as many goals as we did last season, you're going to come under the spotlight. But again, personally, I think there is some scope that there is a decent player in there. His defensive frailties were highlighted a couple of times, and he did have a couple of mistakes, kind of February, March, April time when he was at fault for goals. But if we were to go into next season with him as our first choice right back, again, personally, I wouldn't be too unhappy. Yes, we'd all love to play Football Manager and get rid of every single player and have a blank sheet to work off. But realistically, is he one of the most important players to get out the door? In my opinion, no. He's still young. I think he's played over 100 games in League One and League Two already at about 23 or whatever he is, 23, 24, something like that. So yeah, I think he's someone who we can look to certainly build around and wouldn't be the worst player in the world to have there. He did show some signs under Appleton, in fairness, late on, of adding a bit more attacking nous to his game as well. A couple of games that spring to mind, I think Reading at home, which we lost, ended up playing pretty well. And even under Gareth Ainsworth, in fairness, we had a couple of half decent performances when Luca Hall did all right there as well, which would suggest, he's got that side to him that he can be a bit of a danger going forward. So hopefully dropping down the division, that'll help as well. And I would imagine he'll be someone that will probably be lining up on the first game of the season.
Mm. Okay, so we'll but presume that it's going to be the back four then. Although who knows how it'll pan out, but always a bit up in the air, isn't it, at this stage?
Definitely.
So central. I think Toto and Ciala could follow Paul Hurst to his next club because they're a match made in heaven. Those two.
Sure hope so.
Not okay. Well, we'll won't talk about it, Toto and Ciala. Tom Anderson, it was Michael Appleton's first signing. I think he's somebody who was part of the Doncaster Rovers squad who won the League Two title last season. I don't know that he's going to be amazing on the ball. I would like to, if it's a back four, I'd like to see him partnered with a quick centre half who's very good on the ball. But I also think as a leader and an organizer, I think he could be a useful addition from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I think last season in particular, the club was so severely lacking any players with that character and that leadership. You could see that a mile off. So when our first signing was Anderson, I think most fans were encouraged by that, to be honest. Offered a new deal by a team that went up as champions of League Two, I think I'm right in saying last year. And clearly well thought of at his old club. And again, a big no-nonsense centre half that you need to have in League Two. I know times are adapting, and not every single League Two team is, your big kind of stereotypical crosses in the box, 6'4" striker. But there are still some of those teams, and I think you need someone like Anderson to be able to handle that. I think again, you mentioned it there. It's about now who we put round him. I think another Tom Anderson type player, then you probably would be struggling to see that Appleton side being able to build out from the back. A name that's been mentioned as a possibility that the club are looking at is Sam Stubbs from Cheltenham or from
Oh
Bradford
yes,
in
he was
Cheltenham
one of
last
their best
season.
players last season.
Yeah, so I think if we were able to get Stubbs in, a bit younger, probably a bit more mobile, that would be maybe a nice little pair in there if that does happen. But yeah, I think the signing of Anderson by itself, personally, is one that I'm very happy with. But it is about who we put next to him now, I think, to get, to be able to complement his qualities and have a defence that can do a bit of both, that can play out. Guessing that's how we're going to play. But it's also got that bit of steel and a bit of character about it, which I'm sure Anderson will bring to us.
Mm. You've also got a lad called Morris, I think, who's come through the academy. I don't know if you've got any intel on him, or is he somebody that you're sort of expecting to go out on loan?
I think in terms of the kids that we've got, I know some of them signed extensions. I don't think any, certainly from what's been reported so far, I don't think any are really knocking on the door. Certainly
Mm.
from a defensive perspective. One of the ones would be Jack Loughran, who's an attacker, is someone who was involved in the first team a bit and came on. And also Isaac England, who's a centre midfielder. So they will be probably the two that I would imagine would be the closest ones to having an impact on the first team
Who was the,
squad.
the second name you said? Sorry,
Isaac England,
Isaac England. Okay,
yeah, he's a number six central midfielder, deep line central midfielder, and
okay.
Jack
Because
was there.
I had the names Goodwin and Idawu down for midfield, and Cairns, I think, but I didn't have the
Yeah,
name
so
England.
I, I think I think I'm right in saying Carson Cairns. I think he's a centre back.
Ah,
Um, I think was it Adowo? Was that one Roland Adowo?
yeah, Idawu. Yeah.
He's left us now. He's gone back up to St Mirren. He was
Okay.
on loan. He was on loan there last season. We've managed to sell him for
Right.
some for a fee, remarkably. So he's gone back up there. But yeah, in terms of youngsters, I think Isaac England in midfield. He made a couple of appearances towards the back end of the season. Same for Jack Loughran, who I think is a wide attacker, winger type
Mm.
player. They're probably the two closest ones. But from a defensive perspective, I don't think anyone is seemingly close to breaking into the first team squad, at least not has been reported anyway.
Mm. So George Nurse, then Jack. It's felt for a long time for me from the outside that with these conversations, for Shrewsbury fans, he spent a long time out injured over the last 2 or 3 years, and there's always been a feeling that I've kind of picked up on that if George Nurse was fit, it would make a big difference to us going forward. But he has had those long periods on the sidelines. I'm just wondering, are you hoping that this season he can find that fitness and start, 40 plus league games?
Yeah, I think we'd all love that. Fans that watched him or people that watched him under Steve Cotterill in his first season at the club could see that he was someone who's got talent. Playing more as or at first at least a left centre back in a back three, and then going to more of a wing back later on in the season as well. Everyone could see that he's got the talent to play in League One. Obviously, his injuries then probably ruled him out for the best part of 2 seasons. And as it would anyone, has clearly knocked his confidence and knocked his mentality a bit as well. He's still obviously got another year at the club, which is good, and I think nobody would begrudge seeing George Nurse go on to do well, albeit at times last season he did struggle, but then everyone else in the team did as well. He was far from alone in that, and he did show some good glimpses of the George Nurse of old. So I think, given that he's got a year's contract left, he should be given a chance. I think if he hadn't have had a year's contract left, it would have been a very interesting discussion as to whether he was kept on or not. But it's probably last chance saloon for George Nurse now. I would say, certainly in terms of league football, dropping down to League Two. He's had a season to get used to the rigors of first team football again, Saturday, Tuesdays, and etc. and things like that. If now this season he can't go on to stamp his kind of his claim on the team in a lower division, having had a season to get back, I think things may struggle for him. Listen, I hope he can, and I think he should be given a chance to at least be one of two left backs in the squad. But
Mm.
I do think it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to be the George Nurse of old. As much as I hate saying that,
Yeah.
I think we've got to give him remember that he was out for the best part of 2 years, and to get back
Yeah.
up to speed to such a level is always going to be a difficult task for anybody.
Certainly is. In terms of Mal Benning has been quite a reliable left back at this level previously over a number of seasons with Mansfield Town. He obviously now has that higher League One sort of experience under his belt now as well. I really liked him at Warsaw going back even further. Do you think that he'd be the kind of the steady head, if you like, if George Nurse can't recapture his previous form?
Potentially, I think, being honest, I would probably try and offload Mal to someone else. I think, given he's been at the club for 2 years, the first kind of 6 months, he got a bit of stick from fans, but in my opinion, was okay. Didn't do too much too bad, didn't do too much right. The second half of that first season under Paul Hurst, he did really well, and he earned himself a new 2-year deal in the summer as a result of that form. But I think anybody will, or everybody will admit, last year wasn't Mal's finest season. and he really struggled. No one can question his effort and his endeavour and like I say, the energy that he puts in. But from a quality perspective, he was severely lacking. And I do think the club should be looking to try and offload him. Again, he seems like a great character to have around the place, a great pro. But I think I mentioned Luca Hall maybe not being a priority to try and offload, given that we've got Nurse there as well. And you don't want to go into these seasons with that hangover of the past couple of years and how they've been. I do think the club should probably try to look to offload Benning to someone else. Whether anybody would take him or not, I don't know. But I think we should probably try to look to move on from Mal Benning now, I think, and get someone who's a bit better ultimately to try and kick us on, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see whether somebody else takes him on. In terms of central midfield, you've signed Sam Clucas, who's somebody who does have that high level pedigree, and he's been on a wonderful journey as well, because I'm sure he was playing sort of non-league football quite a few steps down at the start of his career, and ended up playing possibly in the Premier League with Hull City. So he's shown an excellent mentality in his career, and I think he'll be looking to be looked to set an example to maybe some of the younger players in this squad as Michael Appleton's second signing.
Yeah, totally. Again, a bit like Tom Anderson, a leader, someone who's been there, done it, got the T-shirt, and can be that example to younger players of what it takes to get to the Premier League, as he obviously did with, like you said, I think with Hull City, maybe Swansea, maybe both, but certainly with somebody. Anyway, back onto him for now. I think, given that he's that bit older, I think he's mid-30s now, and I think it would probably be fair to say that he won't be playing every game. But from speaking to some Lincoln fans, that technical quality that he's demonstrated with them last season in League One does make me think that he won't have an insignificant impact on the squad, and could be someone that will probably fill that number 6 role, that defensive midfield role, and to implement the kind of style that Appleton wants, be that quarterback that can get on the ball and dictate play from deep. I think he's mentioned he wants to go into coaching as well, so whether there's an avenue for him to explore with there too, I don't know. But I think his character will be very important in the squad and guiding them through, and being that senior figure to try and say get the team through the tough patches in the season to have hopefully a good campaign. I think we need to probably bring someone else in to challenge him in that position, given that, as I said, he probably won't be playing every game. But I think his technical ability is still there. It'd just be a case of, to coin the old term, have his legs gone. And if they haven't, I think we should have a very good player on our hands. If they have, I imagine it won't be cheap, and it might then present some issues. But hopefully we can still get at least a year out of him, if nothing else.
Yeah, the one thing I do like, Jack, is I always believe that after relegation, it's really important that you get these, what I would call culture carriers, people who can come into the dressing room and stamp their mark straight away. And with Tom Anderson, who's just been very successful with Doncaster Rovers, with Sam Clucas, who's had this really eye-catching, unique career. I think these are two people who can set an example and set standards that the club's probably fallen short of in recent years. So that's the one aspect of your early business that does excite me a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Again, when we've been as bad as we've been for the past 2 years, you need fresh players that haven't been, subject to that those tough times. And you need players that can have a bit of character and a bit of spirit and provide a bit of leadership to the team, which again has been severely lacking. Certainly last season was something that the club didn't have at all. So if we can get a couple more in like that as well, I know that John Marquis, who is in the building, will fall into that category too, as someone who's a bit more experienced and a bit of a leader. And maybe one more of them, a goalkeeper. So again, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but that spine of the team of a goalkeeper, Anderson, Lucas, Marquis, you'd like to think is a half decent one. And if you can supplement that with some, good quality loans, some more obviously permanent transfers, hopefully as well, then who knows, maybe we can have a half decent season at least.
Yeah, let's hope so. In terms of other midfield options, the big thing that stands out to me, if you take away the sort of the youngsters in the mix, is legs, because you've got Harrison Biggins, who's a box-to-box midfielder, and you've got Alex Gilead, who isn't very technical, I don't think, but he is a runner, so he's a winger by trade, and then he's been moved into midfield in the last 3 years, I think. Mark Hughes used him in central midfield at Bradford City, and he basically has this role of just do a lot of running. I suppose, yeah, Taylor Perry, I'm not entirely sure about, but yeah, I think with Gilead especially, I think he would be asked with providing that athleticism in midfield.
Yeah, I think Gilead, in fairness to him, was probably one of the only players that could come out of last season with a degree of credit. He works his absolute socks off every game that he played. He put a real shift in, and at times you did feel a bit sorry for him in terms of maybe
Mm.
those around him weren't quite putting in what he was as well. I think in terms of his technical ability, in fairness to him, at times you can see that he's still got that bit of flair about it, and he can drive from midfield as you would have expected to see from him when he was on the wing back a few years ago. I think again he's probably someone that we can look to have in there alongside Lucas or whoever else is going to be in midfield as someone that can be a solid kind of League Two campaigner. As for Biggins, it was a tough season for him last year. He's one of the few players I imagine that can ever say they've played with two different teams in a season, and both have been relegated. Obviously, he was brought in from Doncaster, then shipped out after I think only 2 league games to Carlisle United. Didn't exactly pull up trees there, and then came back in January. Again, showed a couple of glimpses, but also had a couple of really, really poor games. I think with him, you've got to try and cling to the fact of in his last season in League Two, his last full season in League Two with Doncaster, I think he got, off the top of my head, maybe 12, 14 goals and assists combined, something like that, or certainly
Mm.
not an insignificant amount, which is what
Sure.
attracted Paul Hurst to sign him in the first place. And if we do play with a midfield three, you might be given that license again to, attack the box, get on the under crosses and play
Mm.
to what looked like to be his strength at Doncaster a couple of years ago. So
Yeah.
again, I imagine he'll be given a chance alongside Gilead, Lucas, whoever else is in there too. Taylor Perry is someone you mentioned as well. Again, is it a promotion challenge in midfield that we've got? No, I don't think it is. However, you'd like to think it isn't one that's going to be or wouldn't be symptomatic of a
Mm.
team that are going to be struggling as well. I'm trying to think a bit more positively.
It's missing that little bit of creativity, isn't it? Because I look at
Yeah,
Lucas, experience, steady head, Harrison Biggins, athlete, box to box. Same with Alex Gilead, although he's a bit more experienced. Taylor Perry, I think he would profile himself as a more nice technical midfielder, but I don't think his technical ability is good enough to kind of outweigh his limitations in other areas. And then you're
yeah, I
down to
agree.
youngsters in England and Goodwin. So yeah, I think I think although you have got options in midfield, I think that bit more of a creative spark I think could be really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely, like you
Uh,
say, I'll Taylor Perry there. His end product often, his fan wants him. Again, his effort is great. He runs hard all game, but in those crucial
um,
moments, that final pass, that final ball, that final shot, more often than not, doesn't end up being to the level you want it to be, which is
mm,
probably why, finds himself back down in League Two. But hopefully he can kick on. Like, as you mentioned before, Appleton can develop players, and hopefully he can do it with him.
yeah, for sure. I mean, Lachlan is trying to get the pronunciation right there. But he's a bit of a wild card, I imagine, in terms of someone through the academy. I'm wondering, if he has a good preseason, could there be a role for him in terms of an impact sub next year if you want somebody to come in and just bring that bit of youthful exuberant and liven the game up, the last 15 minutes from the bench. I'm wondering if, he could be that guy possibly.
Maybe, yeah. I think he's still only 17 now, so I think to
Yeah.
expect that of him would be tough. I would probably envisage him going out on loan, I guess, to maybe a Conference North, Conference South type team. I think this season he was on loan at Whitchurch Old Port, I think, which is Northwest Counties. Again, good exposure to men's football. That was something that Moore's brought in for some of the young players is that that exposure to men's football, which he got, and hopefully next season he can kick on maybe at a bit of a higher level and show that he can do it there too. In terms of how often he is in the first team squad. If he comes back and does have a flying pre-season, I guess you never say never. But I think it would maybe be a bit unrealistic to expect too much of him from what we've seen at the minute. But you never know.
Never know. So in terms of one of the reasons why I wondered if you might be playing two up top, Jack, is you do have George Lloyd and John Marquise, who I think are two strikers relative to the rest of the squad. I would say it's probably a strong point in the squad. I really like George Lloyd's work ethic. I love that he never stops running and hassling and harrying defenders. I think he's got a great spring on him as well. And I back him to go well in League Two. And then you've got John Marquis, who actually does have history at this level, was top scorer in the division in 16-17 when Doncaster Rovers were promoted. He's since played higher as well. So that would be the one area where I'd go, you know what, if you combine Lloyd's work ethic with Marquise's experience and goal scoring nice, there could be a bit of a combination there. But it's not given that Appleton's going to play two up top.
Yeah, again, it's an interesting point you make there in terms of, I think it's a position we've got a little bit of depth in that Lloyd and Marquis, again, are two players who, well, Lloyd has threatened to be a good League One striker. Obviously, Marquis has proven in the past to be a good League One striker. And even last season, the fact that Marquis, he's got some critics, and I fully understand why those critics are there, but he still managed to bag, I think it was 12 goals in all competitions, something like that. And so in a horrifically poor team attacking wise, to still get 12 goals, and he missed 2 penalties, well, 3, but he scored the rebound for 1. Is you've got to almost take the hat off into him in that regard, and that he obviously found a knack of being in the right place at the right time, even when the chances that he created are few and far between. So you maybe look at that and go, if we are going to be a better team next season, which again, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, we do go down, but you'd like to think it can't be much worse. He's hopefully going to be someone who can, add on to that and be that goal threat at the top end of the pitch. Being totally honest, it wouldn't surprise me if we did sell him, given the money that we haven't got and the investment that we'll probably be looking to make into the squad. If a team, say like I've heard a couple of whispers of Port Vale, maybe that's not come from anywhere substantial, but just I've seen a couple of people mentioning it. A team like that, I could see why they would be in for him, and also why we would sell him for a nominal fee of 80, 90 grand, whatever else, just off the top of my head. As for Lloyd, I think again, a little bit like Taylor Perry in a way. His work rate is phenomenal. He runs his absolute socks off every single game, and in a way that not many other players have done in my time supporting the club. However, again, technically, is he good enough to be a top League One striker, as we hoped he would be last year? No. Hopefully, dropping down into League Two, he can have a bit more of a danger, or can be a bit more of a danger at least. I think his last spell in League Two, again, I mentioned it in my recruitment document at the end of the season. I think he got 5 goals and 5 assists in 21 games at Grimsby under Paul Hurst, ironically. So if he can build off that, there is certainly some hope there. I think Leighton Orient put a bid in for him late on in January because he had caught the eye with his work rate, and it is just now a case of he's one of those players. If he could not learn to finish, but improve that natural striking instinct, he's got a great leap. He's pretty quick. He can use both feet. He can hold it up. He can run in behind. He could be a real asset. But he just needs to add that cherry onto the cake, and hopefully he can do it with us. Because if he does do that, he could then kick on to become a really, really good EFL player. But that's the challenge for him now, I suppose, is to do that. And if we do play only one recognised striker, you'd imagine it'll be Marquis that starts the season if he's still here in that position.
Yeah, that's true. Because in terms of other forward options, you've got Callum Stewart in the mix, Richard Dinanga and Max Mata. Any of those putting themselves in the reckoning?
I think Callum Stewart, again, is someone who got a bit of game time late on in the season. Got his first goal contribution with an assist for John Marquis at Barnsley. Again, realistically, the chances of him making an impact, he was at Leamington last season, did very well there, but to jump up to League One, I think, I wouldn't say fans were expecting too much of him, because he was one of the only players that had, even a degree of excitement to get around, given that he was a young lad who was given a chance, he looked a bit quick and a bit sharp. Fans latched onto that. I think, again, realistic expectations do need to be in place, though, remembering that he's had 6 months of EFL football and that's it. You might be one of these players that you see, once you've been given a good off season this summer, if he's had probably have, strength and conditioning plans and that kind of thing. If he does come back a bit stronger and a bit more streetwise to EFL football, he's certainly got some bright sparks to have. Or he's certainly shown some bright sparks within that, which we can maybe look to build upon. As for Dinanga, being totally honest, I think we only saw him once. I think off the top of my head, he made one sub appearance at home to Bolton after he joined from Telford. So again, he's someone who had a bit of exposure to professional football with Coventry a few years ago, dropped down into obviously the non-league with Telford. He's now trying to work his way back up again. I think if he's got pace, which he presumably has, given that he's a striker or a winger or a wide forward, pace is something that hurts defenders at all levels. And hopefully, it might just be a case of teaching those, those game smarts and a bit more technical quality to give us something there. Again, will he start the season? I'd be shocked. I imagine it'll be a case of probably third, fourth choice, and maybe a bit of an impact player off the bench at most, as things stand at the minute, at least.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of additions then, Jack, just kind of looking at the macro picture, definitely need a goalkeeper. Probably going to need another right back to compete with Luca Hall. Probably going to need another two centre halves, I think. Need one left back if Mal Benning is moved on. But it'd probably be a bit of a luxury to have three there, wouldn't it? Probably need another one or two creative midfielders, and let me have a look. Forwards, possibly maybe if you want to play a front three, maybe need a wide forward or two. So by my calculations, and depending on whether you need number 10 as well, we'll go two for now. I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm thinking 12 to 14 additions between now and the end of the window. Do you think that's realistic?
Yes, kind of. I think we've got 14 players contracted at the minute. I think
Mm-hmm.
of those, there's three that I'd certainly be looking to try and offload in Benning, NCR, and Max Matter up front, which would then take us down to 11. If that was to happen in an ideal world, you're then probably looking at an extra goalkeeper with three centre halves to take us to four, a left back. Probably you probably want three wingers to have some competition up there, a right back, a striker. So you are probably looking at double digits additions, albeit I can't see us having a massive squad. I think the squad, I guess, will probably be somewhere 21, 22, 23, something like that at most.
Mm-hmm.
With people like Alex Gilly as a versatile, who can fill in different positions. If we can get a couple more like him, that will obviously help in that regard. But I certainly think, you're still probably looking at using your five loanee spots, and then probably 4 or 5 permanents you'd imagine will be on the wish list of Appleton too, if he can get everybody out that I say that he wants to, that I want to get out, and I dare say there'll be something he'll be looking to try and move on as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of targets for this season, Jack, I think the club have got to be really realistic. And I think that's probably difficult for fans in a way because you've just seen absolute guff and you've been very patient through that. And to almost say be patient again, it's like, oh my God, give us something. But I do kind of think that while there's no external investment at the moment that's sort of forthcoming or not much that's evident, I think you've got to try and develop some players that you can sell on so that you're in a better position. So for me, I think for this season, it's about Michael Appleton establishing a core of players that he can move forward with, and ideally some young players who can either grow with the club or you can sell on next summer in order to raise the budget and go that way. Because I think there has to be a developmental and partly a stylistic component to this as well. Michael Appleton getting his ideas across, but there's definitely got to be a developmental and stylistic component to this season as well as the result aspect and the obvious, which is making sure you make sure you get to 50 points first.
Yeah, definitely. Again, in terms of expectations, I think a mid-table finish would be a realistic aim. It sounds stupid to say that, given that we're now in League Two after 10 years in League One. But as you say, the first challenge is not to be the next Forest Green and Carlisle, the two teams that finished bottom of League One in the previous 2 years, and then end up going down from League Two the year after. That's the first challenge. As you say, there's lots of spinning plates on the pitch, off the pitch that needs sorting and rectifying. So the aims have got to be realistic. We might bring in 10 excellent players and then have a squad that's capable of challenging for promotion. I think it's too early to judge at the minute. But in terms of developing players, Appleton's mentioned that. He mentioned the reason that he plays how he plays is for that reason, to attract good players, to attract good loans that play the right way that their clubs want them to play, and to be able to sell players on, which he's got a track record of doing at his various clubs. So I certainly think we'll see signings in that mould of players that fit that profile. Obviously, if they pay off, is a different matter, but that's what I'm expecting to happen. I think maybe probably only one more what he classes experienced player, I imagine, will probably come in, given
Yeah.
given the calibre of the first two at least. And it then will be a case of younger players that he can try and mould and shape, be that on loan or permanently. I think there's a big challenge there ahead of the club. I think, though, that it's also important to recognise that Appleton has shown he can do it in similar situations. Hence why there's maybe a couple of rays of light that we can cling to. But because of the amount of uncertainty off the pitch at the moment, I don't think any fan is getting carried away with themselves and won't do until the club is ultimately sold.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what can just kind of home in on this, Jack? What would you say your expectation for next season is? What would constitute a good season for you?
Again, I don't want to sound too pessimistic from this. I think a good season would be, first of all, recruiting a squad, not just for this season, but one that's capable of being there for the next 2 or even 3 years. That is obviously hard at our level, but if we can recruit younger players over 2 or 3 year contracts that have got that potential to develop, I think that would be a good step. And I guess the next logical progression from there would be those players and this squad growing together over the next year so that this time next year we can have a real go at competing at the top end of the pitch, at the top end of the table, sorry. I think realistically, I'm expecting a team that is probably a bit inconsistent and is one that, threatens to be a really good team, but then almost takes a backward step at the same point as well, and is one that probably ultimately finishes mid-table, is where my realistic head is envisaging us being at the moment as we sit here today. I think there's always that nagging doubt in the back of your head that you are going to be the next Forest Green or Carlisle, because of the level of, again, disjointed thinking off the pitch over the past few years is symptomatic of a team that doesn't, turn things around quickly, and that's my big worry, that hangover persists, that decisions don't get made in a cohesive manner, and the club do ultimately drop out of the league, which would be catastrophic for everybody involved with the club. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think it would be foolish to at least not even recognise it's a possibility at the moment. I think if we can get a couple more decent additions in, we should hopefully have enough to at least be safe for one. But I think if you look at all the possible universes that exist out there, there's a universe that exists where we do go down. There's probably a bit more that exists when we have a solid mid-table finish, and there's probably at the minute not many that exist where we go up. So I think given that, we'll probably most likely finish mid-table, albeit you never say never, both in a good and a bad manner at both ends of the table.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as you know, Jack, I'm doing my 1 to 24s in late July, and one of my processes for that this year is rating each team out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine. Not dropped out there. There we go. So what I'd like to do is throw categories at you, and you can give me a number between 1 and 10 on each of them.
Cool.
Starting with ownership.
As we sit here today, 3.
3 for ownership. Infrastructure, quite a wide-ranging topic, that one.
4.
4 for infrastructure. Playing budget.
5.
5 for playing budget. Management.
7.
7 for Michael Appleton and the staff. Goalkeeping department. Let's presume Toby Savin is the number 1 goalkeeper next season. That might not be the case, but let's work on that assumption for the purposes of this.
5.
5 for the goalkeeper. Defence.
6.
6 for the defence. Midfield.
6.
6 for the midfield, lacking a little bit of creativity right now as we speak in mid-June. Attack.
I think I'm going to go 6 again.
6 again for the attack, okay. Squad depth is almost impossible to go for at this stage just because it's so many additions still to come in. Next category is squad stability.
5.
5 for squad stability. Next category is growth potential.
I guess it depends on if you're glass half full or glass half empty. You could say there's loads. You could also say there's none. I think taking into consideration the ownership as well as the current playing staff that we've got as it
So
stands.
just to kind of clarify, I mean in terms of players that you think are going to be a lot better this season versus last season, if that
Right. Okay. 5.
5 for growth. Team spirit.
Sorry,
Dropped out for a moment.
6 for that one.
6 for team spirit. Fitness.
Hard to say without seeing them.
Yeah, it's a lot of players still to come in, so it's a very early stage.
I'll go 7. You've got a few lads that work hard. 7.
7 for fitness, okay. And finally, quality.
For League 2, I mean, I think given that I rated every playing area 6 out of 10, I can't go anywhere else than 6 out of 10 for that at the minute as well.
All right, we'll go 6 out of 10. So a lot's going to be shaped by the remainder of the transfer window, that's for sure. Jack, some final quick fire questions from me. What's the biggest reason to believe in Shrewsbury Town right now?
The management.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the case. Biggest reason for doubt?
The ownership.
The ownership, yeah, that makes sense. And just to add to your first point, Jake Tong, who's a Lincoln City fan, says a big believer that Apple will have Shrewsbury in amongst it next season. Interesting. Trust the process.
Tongue, keep the faith, pal.
He's got more belief than you have.
I know, yeah.
Get him an amber and blue scarf. Where was I? Final question. Just give me a feeling on where things are going for Shrewsbury Town and what next season might have in store, without giving a full prediction because it's very early.
At the minute, meandering along with a lot of nothingness. Really, there's great potential that it could change, but as we sit here today, nearly 8 o'clock on the 19th of June, nothing has changed. So I think they've already said our budget's going to be mid-table League 2. You know, budget's the biggest indicator, isn't it, of where you generally finish. So at the minute, a fairly boring mid-table League 2 finish is what I'm expecting.
Well, there you have it. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight, and everyone get following ShrewsAnalysis. If you like what we do here, you can get subscribed to us on EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. Thanks to you for watching at home, and we'll be back with another summer deep dive very soon.